Sargent is perhaps best known for his painterly brushwork, and the direct approach that he uses can look like it was done really fast and in this fury of movement, but in fact he was working very slowly and deliberately, carefully placing down each stroke with intention as he worked. So I'm going to work into this area on the clothing and using a lot of paint, so I'm really focusing on basically gobs of paint and using the biggest brush that I can for any area. And I'll just basically paint, the intention being to mix the color and just place maybe 3 to 5 strokes with that load of paint before reloading. And so you want to think about the stroke, think about the shape that you want to make it. You might kind of adjust the shape of the edge just a little bit and then stop and reload and sort of assess the tone. Think about any hue shifts. I'm working into an area that's just a little bit deeper, a little bit redder, and we'll just kind of manipulate the brush to put that stroke down. I'm going to take the rag and lift off a little bit on that edge. Also, he would hold the brush towards the back of the brush. This is really hard for me. And he would, just be like placing it on. There's a more of a sort of spring. There's a certain feel when you're holding the brush from such a distance. You almost want to take this like dramatic posture, you know. I think that everything, the way we're moving our body, the way we're holding our brush, it's all tying in to create these brush strokes that he's so well known for. And so the goal being that you want to place it down perfectly and then just leave it as it is. That's not always what would happen. He is well known for having scraped down, you know, if he's not happy with the effects, he'll just scrape the entire painting down and start again. But the final effect would have been done all in one day and in a direct approach where he's painting wet into wet. And you can use the thin edge of the brush and then use the thick edge of the brush, so you're manipulating the shape of the brush stroke, you know, placing it and then pulling it. Just really thinking about the way to kind of move the brush around so that it places on in the way that you want. And then as I move to the shadow side, you know, I'll mix like a little bit more blue, a little bit more even black in. Let's just get some of those darker tones so that I can go on top of that with these lighter notes that again look like they were done in this flurry of activity, but as artists it actually works best if we just slow down and place it with intention, working slowly and carefully to achieve what looks like it was done rapidly and spontaneously. And he's always using the biggest brush possible that he can for, you know, any job. So I'm using a large brush, a large filbert. And again, it does have a certain amount of spring, which he really found helpful in pushing the large quantities of paint around. And then as I go into this area, I'm just going to shift to a slightly smaller brush. I'll just kind of think about it and then go for it. I'm going to do an airplane stroke because you can see how there's a certain drag to the edge. And then reload. And actually I'll use the same brush load for this slightly lighter note. And I really would like to be able to get, you can kind of see the texture of like the lines of the grain of his brush. I don't know, maybe he was using a coarser hog's hair brush for these notes. It's interesting. that is one of the reasons why actually copying an artist's work maybe gives you the best understanding, even beyond reading a lot of research and different accounts of his approach. When you actually try it for yourself, you get first-hand experience. So I can tell just by analyzing these brush strokes that he was doing them by maneuvering his arm around and pulling the paintbrush this way on the stroke. You can tell because the darkest, heaviest part of the paint is on the lower edge, and we've got the sharpest edge down there too, and then he's pulling it as he goes. So I'm going to kind of maneuver my arm around and try and recreate that sense. Yeah, and it's pretty difficult. That didn't really work. I'll just soften it there. We'll pretend it worked. Let's try it another time. Yep, it's difficult. And then there's a couple softer ones. You know, painterly brush strokes, one thing about them is it would almost be impossible to create the exact strokes again, but what you can do is create kind of a similar effect. So yeah, let's try something now with some of these notes in here. You can tell that he put the center one on first, and then he probably didn't reload his brush because these are a little bit lighter and softer, so then he probably just dragged his brush through those areas. So lastly, let's go in and hit this nice, strong, bright brush stroke. And we want to think about it before we do it, and then just start and pull it. And then I think it looks like he would have softened up against the neck a bit to give it a bit of definition.